A woman is now dead after a shooting in Baldwin. Police say they found 20-year-old Ramiah Griffin in an apartment on Young Ridge Drive on Friday afternoon. We're still working to find more information on this.
Good evening. Remiah Griffin's sister tells us that suspect Adelin Itongwa actually attended Remiah's funeral and, in her view, has been trying to garner sympathy for others. Remiah's sister, Mariah, says that she now sees this as all some sort of cover.
This guy sat there, silent and stoic, as the family of Ramiah Griffin wept around him. A funeral for a young mom named Ramiah Griffin. Everyone's crying, heartbroken over losing this 20-year-old TikTok creator. And right there, sitting quietly among them, Adelin Itongwa, the very man police say shot her 12 times just days earlier. Yes, the father of her baby, watching everyone grieve, knowing he's the reason they're all there. I mean, you think about how cold that is, to pull the trigger multiple times while your own child sleeps in the next room. Then to show up at the funeral looking sad like everyone else when you're the one who put her in that casket. This isn't just your typical murder story. This is about as personal as it gets. A man who spent 4 years with Ramiah, had a baby with her, and then allegedly decided she didn't deserve to live. If you're wondering what kind of person could do something this twisted, stick around. This is the story of Ramiah Griffin, popularly known as Remi. Welcome to Crazy Dark Files, where we shed light on the darkest true crime stories to help raise awareness and promote safety. By liking this video, sharing and subscribing to this channel, you're helping raise awareness, spread caution, and maybe even save someone else from the same fate. Don't just scroll past, be the reason someone stays safe.
I felt angry because, like I said, you knew what you did, and for you to reach out, it's like, what are you trying to cover? You thought that you were going to get away with killing my sister?
Ramiah Griffin says her sister Remi and Adelin Itongwa were together about 4 years. In this picture, the two expecting parents were all smiles. Sometime after their daughter was born, they separated, yet maintained what Mariah thought was a civil relationship in the spirit of co-parenting.
Ramiah Remi Griffin was a 20-year-old young woman trying to build something special for herself and her baby. Remi graduated from Stowe Rocks High School and quickly found something she loved doing, creating TikTok videos that showed off her personality and connected with people. She wasn't famous with millions of followers or anything, but she was putting herself out there, building her own little corner of the internet, one video at a time. But if you asked Remi what her most important job was, she'd tell you without hesitation being a mom to her 1-year-old daughter. Friends say she absolutely lit up whenever she talked about her little girl. Like any young mom, she faced challenges, but man, did she love that baby. She'd share these sweet little moments online, first steps, baby giggles, quiet cuddle times, videos that now serve as heartbreaking reminders of what was taken away. Family was everything to Remi, especially her relationship with her sister Mariah. These two weren't just sisters, they were best friends, each other's go-to person when life got complicated. Mariah knew the real Remi, including stuff about her relationship with Adelin that didn't make it onto social media. What happens behind closed doors really don't get spoken of much, Maria later told reporters, hinting that there was more going on than people realized. When Remi walked across that stage at Stowe Rocks High School to get her diploma, she had big plans. She wasn't just making TikToks for fun. She was hoping to turn this into something that could support her and her daughter. She even talked about expanding to YouTube, where she could make longer videos and really show more of who she was. Everyone who knew Remi says the same thing. This was a young woman just getting started. She was figuring out how to co-parent with an ex while chasing her own dreams and making content people enjoyed. She was learning as she went, just like any 20-year-old, but doing it all while raising a baby. At the vigil held for Remi at her old high school football field, Mariah asked the question everyone was thinking: who would want to do something to her and take her life? It just doesn't make any sense. We don't understand. That question hung in the air that night. How could someone with so much ahead of her, a baby to raise, videos to create, dreams to chase, have it all ripped away in an instant? The bright, creative young mom who once walked those high school halls was gone, leaving her family, her friends, and her baby girl behind. Ramiah and Adelin's story started like a lot of young relationships. They got together when she was just 16 and he was 18. For 4 years, they were a couple, going through all the normal ups and downs that teenagers and young adults face. Friends say they seemed like any other young couple trying to figure life out together. Their relationship lasted through some important years: her high school days, the transition to adulthood, and eventually parenthood. Everything changed when Remiah got pregnant. Having a baby is a massive life shift for anyone, but especially for young people still figuring themselves out. When their daughter was born, the reality of parenthood hit hard. The sleepless nights, the constant responsibility, the financial pressure, it all tested their relationship in ways they probably weren't prepared for. According to Maria, Ramiah's sister, something shifted after the baby came. The romantic relationship between Ramiah and Adelin didn't survive the transition to parenthood. They weren't a couple anymore, but they still had this huge, important connection: their daughter. They were co-parenting, Mariah explained after the tragedy. On the surface, things appeared civil between them. They were trying to do what was best for their little girl, even though they weren't together romantically anymore. But Maria saw things in Adelin that concerned her. "I found Itongwa to be a shady person," she told reporters. That word, shady, speaks volumes. It suggests someone who isn't straightforward, someone who might say one thing but do another, someone you can't quite trust. Even more telling was what Mariah hinted at next. What happens behind closed doors really don't get spoken of much. But there were some things that I'd heard, and, it kind of raised an eyebrow. That statement suggests Ramiah might have confided in her sister about troubling behaviors that weren't visible to others. Maybe there were arguments about the baby, about money, about schedules. Maybe there was jealousy or control issues. Whatever it was serious enough to make Ramiah concerned, to raise that eyebrow.
What happens behind closed doors really don't get spoke of much, but, there were some things that I've heard, and it, kind of raised an eyebrow.
Mariah described Itongwa as a shady person and controlling, but she respected the fact that her sister still had love for him.
Co-parenting is hard, even when both people are mature, stable, and have the best intentions. When there's underlying tension, unresolved feelings, or problematic behavior, it becomes a minefield. For Ramiah and Adelin, navigating this new dynamic clearly wasn't easy. From the outside, they might have looked like two young parents making it work. Remiah was building her social media presence, caring for their daughter, and moving forward with her life. Adelin was still involved with his child. They were doing what countless separated parents do every day, trying to raise a child together while living separate lives. But beneath that surface appearance, tensions were brewing. Whatever was happening behind closed doors was serious enough that Mariah wasn't surprised when police eventually identified Adelin as a suspect. That speaks volumes about what she might have known or suspected about the true nature of their relationship after the romantic part ended. The transition from young love to co-parents had created a complicated, tense situation, one that would ultimately end in the most tragic way possible. When young couples break up but have to stay connected because of a child, it creates a unique kind of pressure. For some people, especially those with control issues, the idea that their ex is moving on with their life can be unbearable. Remiah was building her social media presence, focusing on her daughter, and creating a life that didn't revolve around Adelin anymore. For someone who might have still wanted control over her, watching her independence grow could have been infuriating. We don't know exactly what was going through Adelin's mind during this time, but experts who study domestic violence point to some common triggers. Rejection is a big one, the feeling that if I can't have you, no one can. Custody concerns are another, fears about losing access to a child or being replaced by a new partner in the child's life. Then there's simple control, the desperate need to dominate someone else's choices when you feel your own life is spinning out of control. What we do know is that by early February 2024, whatever tension existed between them had reached a breaking point. Something was building, something that would ultimately lead Adelin to allegedly make the decision to end Remiah's life. Do they argue about custody arrangements? Was there a new person in Remiah's life that threatened Adelin's sense of control? Was there a specific incident that pushed him over the edge? The police reports don't give us these details, but something clearly changed in those final days. The fact that Adelin allegedly brought a gun to Remiah's apartment suggests this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. You don't accidentally bring a loaded weapon to your ex's place. This suggests planning, intention, a deliberate choice to create the possibility of violence. What's particularly chilling is that he allegedly chose to do this knowing their 1-year-old daughter might be present. Did he think about what would happen to his child if he killed her mother? Did he consider that his daughter might hear the gunshots that took her mom's life? These questions point to someone whose thinking had become dangerously distorted. In the days leading up to February 9th, Remiah was likely going about her normal routine, creating content, caring for her daughter, staying in touch with family. There's no indication she knew what was coming. Like many victims of domestic violence, she may have been aware of tension, but couldn't have predicted how far it would go. This is one of the most heartbreaking aspects of cases like this. The victim often doesn't see the full danger until it's too late. Warning signs that seem obvious in hindsight can be easy to dismiss in the moment, especially when you're dealing with someone you've known for years. Someone who's the parent of your child. Mariah's comments suggest she saw something concerning in Adelin, but even she couldn't have predicted he would allegedly take things this far. That's the insidious nature of escalating domestic tension. It can simmer below the surface for a long time before suddenly boiling over with devastating consequences. By February 9th, whatever was building between Ramiah and Adelin had reached its breaking point. The co-parenting relationship that looked manageable from the outside was about to end in the most tragic way possible. I'm curious, have you noticed warning signs in relationships around you that others missed? Maybe things that seemed off but people dismissed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. February 9th, 2024 started like any other winter day in Pittsburgh. For Ramiah Griffin, it was probably just another Friday. Maybe she had plans for the weekend. Maybe she was thinking about new content for her TikTok. Maybe she was just focused on taking care of her 1-year-old daughter. She had no way of knowing that by sunset, her name would be in police reports and her family would be planning a funeral instead of a future. The timeline of that afternoon is sparse but devastating in its simplicity. We don't know exactly when Adelin Itongwa arrived at Remiah's apartment in the 5400 block of Youngridge Drive. We don't know if he called ahead or just showed up. We don't know if they argued or if there was any warning at all. What we do know is that at 4:32 p.m., someone called 911. The call was brief, urgent. There had been a shooting. A young woman was down. Help was needed immediately. Pittsburgh police officers responded quickly, racing to the apartment complex with sirens blaring. When they arrived at the address, they had no idea of the horror that awaited them inside. The scene they discovered was devastating. Ramiah Griffin, just 20 years old, lay on the floor of her apartment with multiple gunshot wounds. The medical examiner would later confirm that she had been shot 12 times, an amount of violence that speaks to rage, not just intent to harm. This wasn't just a killing, it was an execution. But the most chilling detail, the one that would haunt even veteran officers, was what they found in the adjacent room. Remiah and Adelin's 1-year-old daughter, alive and unharmed physically, but present during her mother's murder. The child was too young to understand what had happened, too young to call for help, too young to do anything but wait in the apartment where her mother lay dead. The officers immediately secured the scene and called for additional units. One officer stayed with the child while others began the process of collecting evidence and trying to piece together what had happened. Shell casings littered the floor, physical evidence of the 12 shots that had ended a young mother's life. The immediate question was obvious. Where was the shooter? Had they fled? Were they still in the area? Was anyone else in danger? As police began their investigation, they quickly identified Adelin Itongwa as a person of interest.
And the night she found out Remy had been killed, Mariah said Itongwa needed to know as soon as possible.
He was sounding normal, so in my head, I'm like, he doesn't know what happened. So I didn't want to be the one to tell him what happened. Looking back, it's like he knew what happened.
The news of Itongwa's arrest reached Mariah today as she and her mom were on their way to a custody hearing for Remy's daughter. Now Mariah's even more determined to ensure her niece is placed in the right home, one that is a reflection of the love Remy embodied.
She was the one you would call when you needed help, when you needed a shoulder to cry on. She was the one. We have part of our justice, but we didn't get all of it yet.
The father of Remiah's child, her ex-boyfriend, the man she had been co-parenting with, He was nowhere to be found at the scene. Detectives began interviewing neighbors, asking if anyone had heard the shots, if anyone had seen Adelin arriving or leaving, if there had been any signs of an argument before the gunfire. In cases like this, witness statements can be crucial, but often people don't want to get involved or didn't notice anything unusual until it was too late. Meanwhile, other officers were tasked with the heartbreaking job of notifying Remiah's family. Somewhere across town, Maria's phone rang with news that would shatter her world. Her sister, her confidant, the young woman who had shared her concerns about her shady ex, was gone. Back at the crime scene, forensic technicians meticulously documented everything: the position of Remiah's body, the location of each shell casing, any signs of struggle or forced entry. They took photographs, collected evidence in sealed bags, and began the process of reconstructing the final moments of Ramiah Griffin's life. The medical examiner would later determine the exact cause of death: multiple gunshot wounds. But the why was harder to pin down. What pushes someone to fire 12 bullets into the mother of their child? What level of rage or desperation leads to such an act of violence? As night fell on February 9th, Remiah's apartment was transformed from a home into a crime scene. Yellow police tape cordoned off the area. Officers stood guard to preserve evidence. Neighbors gathered in shocked clusters, trying to process what had happened in their community. And somewhere in the city, a 1-year-old child who had lost her mother was being cared for by relatives or social services. A tiny witness to an unthinkable crime. Too young to tell anyone what she had seen or heard. Too young to understand that her life had just been permanently altered. The hunt for Adelin Itongwa was just beginning. Police put out an alert describing him as armed and dangerous. His photo was distributed to news outlets. Officers began checking known addresses, interviewing friends and family, trying to determine where he might have gone after allegedly committing one of the most heartless crimes imaginable: killing his child's mother with the child in the next room. As dawn broke on February 10th, the investigation into Ramiah Griffin's murder shifted into high gear. The Allegheny County Police Department's homicide unit took over the case, bringing in their specialized experience with violent crimes. This wasn't just another homicide. This was a young mother gunned down with her baby nearby, and the suspected killer was still out there. The first 48 hours of any murder investigation are crucial, and detectives worked around the clock. They started by interviewing everyone who might have information: neighbors who lived in the apartment complex, friends who had spoken to Ramiah recently, family members who might know about tensions between her and Adelin. Maria's statements about Adelin being shady and her concerns about what happened behind closed doors took on new significance. What had once been worrying behavior was now potential evidence of escalating danger that had culminated in murder. Investigators also collected surveillance footage from the apartment complex and surrounding businesses. In today's world, cameras are everywhere, and they can tell a story that witnesses might miss. Did any cameras capture Adelin arriving at or leaving Remiah's apartment? Was there footage of him purchasing ammunition or a weapon? Every video frame could potentially provide crucial evidence. Cell phone records became another important piece of the puzzle. Who did Ramiah call or text in her final hours? Was there communication between her and Adelin? GPS data could potentially place Adelin at the scene at the time of the murder. Digital breadcrumbs that are nearly impossible to hide in our connected world. Forensic evidence from the crime scene told its own story. The 12 shell casings found in Remiah's apartment were analyzed for fingerprints and DNA. Ballistics experts examined them to determine what kind of weapon was used. If Adelin owned a gun, could it be matched to these casings? Every piece of physical evidence brought investigators one step closer to building a solid case. As days passed, the investigation continued methodically. Detectives followed every lead, checked every alibi, and slowly built a case that pointed directly at Adelin Itongwa. The evidence was compelling enough that on February 21st, nearly 2 weeks after the murder, police were able to locate and arrest him. The charges were severe: criminal homicide and endangering the welfare of a child. The second charge acknowledged the particularly disturbing aspect of this crime, that Adelin allegedly murdered Remiah knowing their 1-year-old daughter was in the adjacent room. Not only had he allegedly taken a mother's life, but he had put his own child in danger and subjected her to trauma that, even if she was too young to remember consciously, might affect her for years to come.
The 22-year-old Itongwa is in the Allegheny County Jail tonight pending preliminary arraignment. In addition to being charged with criminal homicide, he's also charged with endangering the welfare of a child.
After his arrest, Adelin was processed, photographed, and placed in custody to await trial. The mugshot that would later appear in news reports showed a young man who looked nothing like a stereotypical murderer, just an ordinary person who had allegedly made the devastating choice to end someone's life. For the detectives who worked the case, the arrest brought a measure of professional satisfaction. They had removed a potentially dangerous person from the streets, but they knew all too well that no arrest could bring Remiah back to her family or give her daughter back her mother. As one investigator later told reporters, "We can build a case, we can make an arrest, we can seek justice through the courts, but we can't undo what happened in that apartment on February 9th. That's the hardest part of this job." News of Remiah's murder spread quickly through Pittsburgh's McKees Rocks community. For many, it was incomprehensible. A vibrant 20-year-old mother known for her TikTok videos and warm personality, gunned down in her own home. The shock rippled outward from her immediate family to friends, former classmates, and even those who only knew her through social media. Within days, a vigil was organized at the Stowe Rocks High School football field, where Remiah had once walked as a student. Dozens gathered in the bitter February cold, holding candles that flickered in the winter wind. Former teachers spoke of her potential, friends shared memories, and family members tried to make sense of the senseless. "Who would want to do something to her?" one relative asked through tears, a question that hung in the air unanswered. At that point, police hadn't yet named Adelin publicly as a suspect, and many in attendance couldn't imagine who would harm the young mother. Remiah's funeral was held shortly after, a heartbreaking ceremony where a young life was mourned instead of celebrated for its future achievements. Family members spoke of her love for her daughter, her dreams, her smile. What they didn't know, what would only come to light later, was that Adelin Itongwa was among the mourners. In one of the most chilling details of this case, the man suspected of firing 12 bullets into Remiah had the audacity to attend her funeral, to stand among her grieving family, to watch as they lowered her casket into the ground. Whether this was an attempt to appear innocent or some twisted need to witness the consequences of his alleged actions, it showed a level of calculation that stunned even veteran detectives when they later learned of it. Meanwhile, Remiah was dealing not only with grief but with the immediate practical concerns of what would happen to Remiah's daughter. The 1-year-old had been taken into temporary custody by Child Protective Services after being found at the crime scene, and Remiah was determined that the child should be with family, not in the system. She was actually on her way to a custody hearing when she received the news of Adelin's arrest on February 23rd. The timing was surreal. As she was fighting to secure her niece's future, police were taking into custody the man they believed had destroyed the child's family. "I was heading to the hearing when I got the call," Remiah later told reporters. "They said, 'We got him.' I just broke down right there. It was like relief and horror all at once, knowing for sure it was him." The custody situation added another layer of complexity to an already tragic situation. Here was a child who had lost her mother to violence and whose father now faced murder charges. Who would raise her? How would they explain what happened when she was old enough to ask? How do you tell a child that her father allegedly killed her mother? For now, family members have stepped in to provide stability and love for the little girl who lost everything on February 9th. They're determined that she'll know about her mother, the real Ramiah, not just the victim described in news reports, but the young woman who loved music and making videos, who had dreams and a contagious laugh. The community continues to process what happened. Ramiah's TikTok videos remain online, digital echoes of a voice silenced too soon. Her friends post memories and messages to her accounts, as if somehow their words might reach her. Teachers at Stowe Rocks High School talk to students about domestic violence and warning signs, hoping to prevent another tragedy. And somewhere in Pittsburgh, a little girl who will never remember her mother grows a day older, surrounded by a family determined that she'll be defined by love, not by the violence that took her mother away. This tragedy has left a child without both parents, one taken by violence, one facing justice. What do you think should happen in cases like these where children are left behind? Let me know in the comments. Ramiah Griffin's story isn't just a tragedy, it's a warning. When Remiah described Adelin as shady and mentioned things happening behind closed doors, she was identifying red flags that in hindsight signaled danger. These warning signs appear in many relationships before violence erupts: controlling behaviors, isolation tactics, jealousy, and unpredictable anger. The challenge is recognizing them not in retrospect but in real time, when intervention might still prevent tragedy. For young parents like Remiah and Adelin, the pressures can be overwhelming. The transition from romantic partners to co-parents is challenging under the best circumstances. When you're barely out of your teens, still figuring out your own identity while responsible for a new life, those challenges multiply. Support systems become crucial. Family members, friends, community resources, and professional counseling can provide the guidance and relief valves that might prevent pressure from building to dangerous levels. Perhaps most importantly, Remiah's story reminds us of the critical importance of speaking up. Maria knew something wasn't right with Adelin, but like many of us might do, she kept her concerns relatively private. It's not her fault. The responsibility for Remiah's death lies solely with her killer, but her experience highlights how difficult it can be to know when to intervene, when to report, when to insist that someone get help. If you see concerning behavior in a relationship, whether it's your own or someone else's, say something to a trusted friend, to a professional, to a hotline counselor. The conversation might be uncomfortable, but discomfort is a small price to pay for potentially saving a life. Ramiah Griffin should be watching her daughter grow, building her future. Instead, her story has become a painful lesson about what happens when warning signs go unaddressed and violence is allowed to escalate behind closed doors. Ramiah Griffin was more than the tragic end to her story. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and most importantly, a mother who loved her little girl. Her TikTok videos captured a young woman with dreams and a future, someone who brought joy to those around her. At just 20 years old, she had already created a legacy of love that continues through her daughter. As of now, Adelin Itongwa awaits trial for criminal homicide and child endangerment. The legal process moves forward, but no verdict can restore what was lost on February 9, 2024. A young woman's life was cut short. A child lost her mother, and a family was forever changed by violence that might have been prevented. If there's one thing to take from Remiah's story, it's that relationship violence rarely appears without warning. The signs are often there, waiting to be recognized and addressed before tragedy strikes. No one should have to face relationship violence alone, and no one else should have to experience what Ramiah and her family have endured. If this story impacted you, please hit the like button and subscribe to Crazy Dark Files for more in-depth true crime stories that not only inform but potentially save lives.